What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit that like button and let me know what you think of today's very interesting discussion in the comment section below. If you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet. We're living in a rocket seeing this video for the first time. I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another sit down video. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get into another organized crime topic. And over the last several days, a truly historic extradition of 29 of the most powerful and dangerous cartel members on the planet has went down. It's historic for many reasons. I'll be honest. The U.S. extradites criminals all the time, but the scope of doing this all at once and some of the names involved are truly unprecedented. Today, we're going to talk about the inner workings of what exactly went on here, why it happened, who some of these people are, but then again, why it won't change much in the war on drugs. As many of you know, over the last month or so, President Donald Trump has initiated a 25% tariff on goods coming in from Mexico. And this has obviously been a problem for the new Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum. We recently, though, got a little bit of information as to how this whole transfer went down. Now, Donald Trump will tout it as a success, and it is. That said, these individuals that were arrested have all been in custody for a long period of time, and this is not a new thing. The U.S. extradites about 60 people from Mexico per year into America. The scope, though, of this extradition is quite unbelievable, and it's the names that are on it that make it so interesting. Now, we recently learned of an interesting legal loophole, and this was kind of discussed by one of the higher ups in Mexico, a prosecutor general called Alejandro Gertz. Now, recently he had a press conference and he would discuss kind of what had all happened here. And he said, quote, in accordance with the bilateral treaty on this matter between our countries, it was more of a sending of people. Security Secretary Omar Garcia Harfuch, who I'm going to talk about today, spoke of a transfer as well. Gertz explained that the operation was carried out at the express request of the United States and that Mexico responded based on their national security law and the constitutional article that empowers the head of the government, Claudia Sheinbaum, to preserve it. Gertz also pointed out that Washington presented Mexico with a formal, written, and concrete request to carry out the operation specifically against 29 drug traffickers within the framework of the Palermo Convention, the UN agreement to combat transnational organized crime that establishes guidelines on extradition, a recourse the official insisted was not used. He would also say that there was a well-founded request from the government of the United States. That was the reason why the whole procedure was triggered. Gertz added that the institutional mobilization was immediate. Within hours of receiving requests, the National Security Council was convened. The analysis was made at the meeting. The legal bases were established to ensure they were fulfilled, and the procedure was carried out in a timely manner. So a lot of legal jargon there. What does this actually mean? So essentially, as I said, extradition happens all the time between the United States and many countries who they have extradition treaties with. All of the individuals shown in this, I'm not going to go over every one of them, but all of them are in custody and have been in custody, some of them for a decade or more. Now, you have to remember, the end of the road for any criminal worldwide is here in America. We have some of the most secure prisons in the world, and these people here are all deathly afraid of dying in federal prison. The end of the road is places like ADX, United States penitentiaries. These guys, some of them have been able to continue to do their business behind the wall in Mexico. Some even escape. Guys like El Chapo escaped from Altiplano, which is one of the most secure prisons in Mexico. When you come here, though, it's a different level of security. You're not escaping from ADX. And ask El Chapo how he feels being in ADX. It is truly a horrific, hell-like existence. And some of the people that I'm going to talk about today that are on this list and shown in this photo are bad people. All of the people here, most of them have major rewards, bounties on their heads, $2, $5, $10, $20 million. The United States wants these people to pay for the horror they feel has been unleashed by their behavior. Most of the people in that photo there are responsible in trafficking metric tons of narcotics into America. And a lot of these people have directly contributed to the drug war, and the government wants to fight them. Now, some of them, like Rafa Quintero, who we'll talk about, the United States has had a problem with for years. They believe he was behind the death of a DEA agent in 1985. So I'm going to go through some of these people. Before, though, I do it, make no mistake about it. This extradition, okay, and I'm not a political guy. This is not a political channel. I don't like either side, but the right will champion this as the going after cartel stuff, when that's not what happened. These people have all been in custody for a long period of time, and most of them have been living in pretty bad conditions. That said, this will not change or affect the drug trade at all. One thing we have to understand is until we address the need for narcotics in our society, none of this will change. Okay. At the end of the day, drugs start somewhere and end up somewhere. The end goal and the end game for those narcotics is in the hands of street users, people who have a need and an insatiable fix to do narcotics. Okay. Until we address that root cause, a need for something, none of this will stop. Okay. And take it from someone in me who I know a lot about these groups. Okay. None of these people, the drug trade has never been affected. The U.S. tried to paint El Chapo as the boogeyman against narcotics. The Sinaloa cartel is as powerful as it ever was. All of these people that I will talk about today are all extremely powerful in Mexico. Some of them have ties to some of the highest levels of government. None of the drug trade was affected. It's just like any other thing. You take one out, one comes in and takes his place. Until we address the important root cause of this, nothing will change. You can send in whatever troops you want. You can do any of that. None of it will matter. And this is a prime example of that. All of these people were some of the most powerful people in Mexico, and nothing has stopped. The drug trade is as powerful as it ever was. So if you want to debate me on this topic, you're welcome to it. I'm not one of these people that is clouded by a fan of a certain president or a candidate. I don't care about that stuff. The truth of the matter is none of this will affect the root causes of the drug trade. Let's get into some of these people because some of their stories are very interesting. And I want to just discuss the fact that all of these people, and we'll find they really deserve to pay for what they've done. One of the most important extradited people over the last couple of days was this guy, Miguel Trevino Morales. Now, I have done 700 or so videos on this channel. I've looked into hundreds, thousands of people, quite honestly, that have been involved in organized crime, mobsters, gangsters, drug traffickers, terrorists. Very few people are as depraved, evil, and savage as Miguel Trevino Morales. Now, unfortunately, YouTube makes it impossible for me to monetize this video and actually talk about some of the depraved things that Mr. Trevino has done over the years. But I'll try to sum up who he is in a matter that people can understand his level of savagery. Miguel Trevino was nicknamed Z40, aka Zeta 40. Now, I'm not going to go into the history of Los Zetas. Los Zetas essentially, though, were a group of military men who worked for the Mexican military. Z is the radio code, Zeta Uno, Zeta Dos, Zeta Tres. They eventually started working for a group called the Gulf Cartel. Now, the Gulf Cartel is the longest tenured drug trafficking group in Mexico. The Gulf Cartel has been around since the 30s. They originally trafficked alcohol. They then got into gambling houses, things of that nature. And by the 70s, they essentially transformed modern day narco trafficking. Juan Garcia Abregu was really the forefather of it, and is probably one of the richest people in the history of Mexico due to selling cocaine. The Zetas were formed as a armed wing of the Gulf Cartel back in the 90s. The leader at the time, Asiel Cardenas, was worried about rivals, so he decides, hey, instead of dealing with like militia people and farmers and stuff, I'm going to go out and recruit the best people, military people. So he creates these groups, Los Zetas. They then become a group that's just making their own money. They transform into their own cartel. And Miguel Trevino is a guy who was born in 1970. He begins eventually working for Los Zetas. And what made him really successful for the Zetas was he spoke English, which on the border where he lived in Laredo, Texas, that was really important to, ferrying drug trafficking routes and creating relationships. Trevino was really helpful in that. He also had a lot of ties to Texas. He was very connected in Dallas. He was very connected in major metropolitan areas in the Lone Star State. And it made him very important to what Los Zetas was doing from a national standpoint in Mexico. He also eventually would start working as the liaison out of the state of Veracruz. He basically ran Veracruz. He was the plaza boss. So think of it in terms of the mafia. He was the capo regime of Veracruz. He was very powerful for Los Zetas, one of the most powerful people the cartel had. Eventually, Arciel Cardenas is put into prison. Eventually, leadership stuff happens. And eventually, Los Zetas become their own group. The national president, the leader, was the guy Heriberto Lescano. And the Heriberto Lescano, though, eventually was killed. And the number two in the regime at the time was Miguel Trevino. He had developed kind of a cult figure. He was kind of immortal in a way. Like, he was unafraid to die. He would survive gun battles. And he was extremely violent. Now, he was different because Los Zetas had always been run by military people. Heriberto Lescano was one of the original Zetas that was recruited by Arciel Cardenas. Trevino wasn't. Trevino was more of a street kid. He had street smarts. He was a very depraved guy. And we look at some of the things he did while in control. This is a guy that perpetrated massacres in 2010 involving the death of 72 migrants. He perpetrated another massacre in 2011 in the area of San Fernando, Tamaulipas, where 193 migrants were taken out. Sadly, I can't go into some of the truly horrific things Mr. Trevino was a part of. That said, maybe at some point I'll do more on it. Unfortunately, YouTube doesn't allow it. Eventually, though, Trevino was arrested in 2013 in Nuevo Leon, and he has been incarcerated in Mexico since then. We were never given a timetable as to if he'd ever be released. I don't know if it was a life sentence, but the United States government knows exactly what I know, and they know how dangerous Mr. Trevino is, and they wanted him to pay for his crimes here in America. Now, once he was arrested in 2013, his brother, Omar Trevino, a.k.a. Zeta 42, he took over, but he didn't last long on the street. He was apprehended in Monterrey in 2015. Now, this is a photo of the two brothers just days ago in custody. They don't look the same. They look disheveled. They look older. They look very just kind of lost, quite honestly. And I think it will really hit them when they sit in, MDC for a couple of days. They are going to be some of the public enemy number ones in this case. They're some of the most high profile people in this. Now, what I discussed earlier about this not stopping the flow of narcotics, it truly hasn't. In fact, one of their nephews, a person called Juan Gerardo Trevino Chavez, Hueva Trevino, he actually took over a splinter group of Los Zetas, a group called Cartel del Noreste. And if you understand the border regions in and around Texas, both the Gulf Cartel and groups like Cartel del Noreste have ruled for years. And if you look at this map in the top left corner, you can see Nuevo Laredo. It's got that kind of darker light green. That is all territory of CDN, Cartel del Noreste, the Northeast Cartel. They have held sway for years, and they've made a lot of money in that border region of Laredo and Mier and those areas. So the family lineage of Mr. Trevino has continued for decades. And in fact, his nephew, who actually was recently arrested, they've had nephews, nieces, all sorts of people in the drug trade. The Trevino name in terms of Tamaulipas and near the border has been very important. That said, the two most important people will now likely die in federal prison, and that is a very just end. I wish I could go into some of the horrible, horrific, truly savage things Mr. Trevino has done. I'll leave you with one of them. I heard a story once about Trevino, in essentially that he couldn't sleep at night unless he had taken someone out that day. He would just drive around and say, "Hey, shoot that guy," and they would do it. He was a sick fuck, truly. Let's get into the kind of prize possession and the extraditions here. It was this guy, Rafael Caro Quintero. And out of all the people we'll talk about today, Mr. Caro Quintero is one of the true originators and pioneers of narco trafficking. He was one of the people that set up the Guadalajara cartel. They've made television shows about it. Caro Quintero was born in 1952 in Badiraguato, which is in Sinaloa. It's actually where El Chapo Guzman is from. Badiraguato has always been very fertile narco territory. Caro Quintero was born into a big family. He was one of 12 kids. He was the oldest son, and by 16, he decided that he wanted to go out and see the world. He had a pretty good mind as far as business was concerned. He would move to the border state in Mexico of Sonora. He would become a livestock farmer and truck driver, eventually started cultivating marijuana and started meeting the right people like Felix Gallardo and guys like that. And they would form the original Guadalajara cartel, which would transform into what we know today as all these different cartels, right? One person ran the border. One person ran southern Mexico. One person ran western Mexico. One person ran the Pacific coast. It was all kind of set up. And if you've watched Narcos, you know that. I'm not going to go through that history. But one of the reasons that Caro Quintero has been so elusive over the years is some of the things that he's allegedly participated in. And one of the things that really has made him public enemy number one for the United States for a long period of time is his alleged involvement in the disappearance and eventual murder of DEA agent Kiki Camarena. Kiki Camarena would disappear in the mid-'80s. And when we look back as to what happened here, I'm not going to go through that. That's been largely talked about, Kiki Camarena. That said, he would be eventually arrested, Caro Quintero, in 1985. He paid for his crimes. He was a drug trafficker. He was a murderer, and he was sentenced to 40 years. He did his 40 years. He was released in 2013. And the United States would discuss, including at the time President Barack Obama, they were very upset with the fact that Mr. Caro Quintero was released due to the fact that he had been on the hook for taking out a DEA agent. And Obama said, well, hold on a second. We want to then get him, and we want him to face charges in this country. That said, he was released anyway. He goes back to Sonora, and we see about 10 years ago a group called the Caborca Cartel pop up in Sonora. And if you look into the Caborca Cartel, a lot of the people that are allegedly running it are members of Mr. Caro Quintero's family. Now, I want to talk about, though, the brittle state that Mr. Caro Quintero is in. And according to an interview he gave to Proceso magazine in Mexico in 2016, he claims that, A, he had nothing to do with killing Kiki Camarena, and that after he was released from prison, he claims that he visited Chapo Guzman and claims that he did not want to return to the drug business. He would tell the reporter that he was, quote, no longer a drug trafficker, and peace was the only thing he desired. Now, according to Mike Vigil, a DEA agent who previously led international operations for the Drug Enforcement Agency, he would state that at this point, Caro Quintero is a, quote, shell of his former self, and that it's, quote, ludicrous to look into allegations that he may have leadership in the Sinaloa cartel, which I agree with on that. That said, do I do think he's making money, though, from the Caborca cartel? Probably. That said, he is the most prized possession here. Here he can be seen being taken off the plane a couple of days ago. He will die in federal prison, and this is a just end for a person who likely was involved in killing a DEA agent. Now, I'm not going to go into conspiracy theories on the CIA being involved in Kiki Camarena. It wouldn't put it past me, but I'm not going to go into conspiracy theories because YouTube doesn't like it. That said, Caro Quintero is definitely the prize catch in this. Let's get into some other people that were apprehended and not apprehended, but extradited. One of the more underrated ones is Vicente Carrillo Fuentes. who at one point was the leader of the Juarez cartel. The Juarez cartel is another group that has dominated the border in and around Juarez, El Paso. This is a huge border point. And for years, the Juarez cartel has owned it. They have made tens, hundreds of billions of dollars selling narcotics and moving stuff through this area. If we know anything about Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, his brother, Amado Carrillo Fuentes, aka the Lord of the Skies, was influential in transforming El Paso and Juarez into one of the main border points that we have for narco trafficking in this country and in Mexico. Here is Amado. He, over the years got plastic surgery to evade the police. But he had developed a system of Lear jets that was moving narcotics in and out of Mexico. Him and his brother, once he was taken out, Amado Carrillo Fuentes, his brother would take over, and he has ruled with an iron fist for many years. There's actually was a $20 million reward out on Vicente Carrillo Fuentes. He was arrested in 2014, has been in prison over the last 10 or so years. One of the more interesting people that was extradited that a lot of people don't know about is this guy, Eric Valencia Salazar, a.k.a. L85. Now, L85 is only 42 years old. He was born in 1982 in Jalisco, which is a western state in Mexico, and it's actually become one of the bigger hubs for drug trafficking in Mexico today. Understand that in places like Jalisco and places like Colima, they have one of the biggest ports in Mexico, a place called Manzanillo. And for years, Eric Valencia Salazar was one of the main people for Cartel Jalisco and the Nueva Generacion in Manzanillo. They have kind of run those the port crossings for years. Now, Salazar has a really interesting story because he was originally part of the Milenio Cartel back in the 90s and 2000s and was very close at one point to young El Mencho, a.k.a. Nemesio Asaguera Cervantes, who at this point right now in 2025 is the most wanted drug trafficker on the planet. Those two, Valencia Salazar and El Mencho, would eventually create a group called Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generacion, the New Generation Cartel. Now, what's interesting about Eric Valencia Salazar is he would eventually split from CJNG. He was a high-ranking lieutenant. He was in charge of ports. He was very feared. He actually becomes disenchantized with Mr. Mencho and decides to create his own cartel. He creates this group called Nueva Plaza, right? And with his connections, his ability to do things, him and a guy called El Cholo, this guy right here, they create their own cartel, and they become public enemy number one of CJNG. Now, you may notice that El Cholo is sitting there. Those are not military people. That is CJNG. They would eventually kidnap El Cholo and interrogate him on camera. And what we would learn is something really interesting. And this shows how connected some of these people may possibly be. Now, I mentioned how tied in Eric Valencia Salazar is. I would say in terms of over the last 10 years in Mexico, Eric Valencia Salazar is probably one of the more important people. I mean, he was really powerful, set up tons and tons of shipments over the years, just a guy that really made CJNG go. But according to El Cholo, right, this is an interrogation he had. He would claim that he had Omar Garcia Harfuch on his payroll, essentially, and that Garcia Harfuch, who is one of the most highly decorated police in Mexico and currently is on the president of Mexico's cabinet. He's in control of the secretary of not defense, but policing, essentially. He runs policing, really, in Mexico. And El Cholo claims in this interrogation that he met with Omar Garcia Harfuch on multiple occasions due to the fact that, according to him, they both had a common enemy, CJNG. Now, I want to discuss the interrogation. And this is the translated version of El Cholo's interrogation. He would say, "My name is Carlos Enrique Sanchez Martinez, a.k.a. El Cholo. I'm originally from Guadalajara, Jalisco. I'm here because I'm an enemy of CJNG. I met with Omar Garcia Harfuk in the federal district so that he could give me his backing. This is due to us being after the CJNG. And he did give me his full support. But he told me that he needed something in return so that I could operate with his support and his people among the city. And so I kicked everything off. All the crimes that took place in Tanala, Talacapec, Talajamuco, I am personally responsible for. And I myself called authorities so they could turn everything into a heightened police matter. The individuals who sponsor support here in this city are Mario Alberto, aka L03, and Sembrano, aka L02. Anyways, I'm the person responsible for the grenade thrown at the American embassy. I'm also someone that has done stuff to generate panic within the city. I also gave El Marino the orders to kill the 11 Masons in Tanala. All the chaotic crimes that took place were done on my orders. But I did this on the condition that Omar Garcia Harfuk would support me in everything. He is a criminalistic individual. You guys, the few of mine that are still supporting me, it's best for your own good to start taking care of your family so you don't end up like me. So let's go through that. What did he say? Well, he said basically that Omar Garcia Harfuk, who is, again, now one of the top people in Mexico from a policing standpoint, he had to deal with. And he also stated that don't want to end up like me. And you definitely don't want to end up like El Cholo because I've seen his death. It was characterized as one of the worst in the history of Mexican narco cartels. And this is him. I'm not going to keep that up very long. That's him wrapped up. And I've seen his face. You don't want to end up like him. But this shows the power that these people have. One of the people also extradited recently also is connected to El Mencho. It's his own brother, Antonio Asaguera Cervantes, who goes by the nickname Tony Montana. This has to make El Mencho a little worried because not only does L85 know a lot about him, but his brother, who knows anybody better? Mencho's own brother is really important to the operations of his cartel. He was a very important financier, operations man. He was arrested in late 2022 and will now have to come to America and pay for his crimes. I would wonder, obviously it's his brother, but you have to wonder if any of these people will flip, right? I mean, when you look at someone like L85, right? I mean, he's a dead man walking in Mexico. I mean, he has to be kind of happy he's here in America. Could he flip? He's only 42 years old. He's got his whole life in front of him. Who knows? I'll be interested in knowing. My guess is, though, that Tony Montana won't. He's an old school guy, and he loves his brother. One of the final people I'm going to talk about is someone that I'm sure you've probably heard of at least on one level, and I'll tell you why. It's a guy called Jose Alberto Garcia Villano, a.k.a. La Quena. Now, La Quena is part of Cartel del Golfo, the Gulf Cartel, who I talked about earlier. They run the northeast corner of Mexico at the border. Now, La Quena is a group, head of a group called Los Ciclones and the Scorpion Group. They're armed wings of the Gulf Cartel. And Mr. Quena, he operates out of Matamoros, which has been the hub of the Gulf Cartel for decades, really. And I kind of talked earlier about the success of the Gulf Cartel in Mexico, and notice the purple up in the top right corner. That is all Los Ciclones territory. Now, the Gulf Cartel has various groups, Los Panteros, Los Rojos, Los Metros. They've all kind of been battling. And the Gulf Cartel, these factions that I just mentioned, they're at war with Cartel del Noreste and Los Zetas Via Escuela, a.k.a. the old school Zetas. A lot of groups here, but they're kind of warring. The groups that are in the gray and purple, they are all connected. And some of them even fight occasionally. Now, one of the reasons this guy is so important is you may remember back in 2023 when 4 Americans went to Mexico for what they call cosmetic surgery. 2 of them were killed and 2 were basically kidnapped. This guy, La Quena, led the group that did that. And he had some major apologies to make due to the fact that this did not go well, and this pissed the government off. You better believe that the government is going to drop the fucking hammer on La Quena for that behavior. They're going to get back on that, even though they apologized, the cartel, for it. Americans died on Mexican soil because of La Quena's people, and you better believe the government is going to drop the hammer on him for it. The truth, though, of the matter is the government is dropping the hammer on all these people. All of these people are incredibly dangerous, incredibly depraved, and very powerful in terms of drug trafficking. Now, I went over a few of them, but there are people all over Mexico that were arrested as well. People from the old Beltran Leyva cartel, people from the Sinaloa cartel and the Los Chapitos faction, people from the old Tijuana cartel, people from La Familia Michoacana. So many people were arrested, 29 in all. Truly one of the more historic, well-together, put-together extraditions ever. And now these people, all of them, will likely either plead or go to trial, and most of them will die in federal prison, if not spend the next several decades there. We have to wonder, though, if some of them will flip, what will go on here. It's going to be a very interesting balancing act. But make no mistake, as I said time and time again, this is, again, just a blip on the radar. None of it will affect the trafficking of narcotics, the trafficking of people, the trafficking of all sorts of things into America until we take a generational look into the need for narcotics, the insatiable desire for people to do them in America and abroad. None of this will stop. Ask yourself this. Do you know the country that consumes the most coke in Europe currently? Do you know where it is? Scotland. I bet you didn't know that. But until there is no need anymore, and remember back to Prohibition when we're talking about the mafia. The mafia was created because of the need for alcohol. We outlawed it, and look at what happened. We created a monster. And by outlawing narcotics, we have created another monster until we realize that the only way to fix this is to legalize all of this stuff. A generational throw of cash into this, hurling all the money that we have wasted, putting people in prison and doing all the stuff we do. The criminal justice system has been built on narcotics. And then, from a truly ignorant standpoint, we have made prisons for profit. There's a reason all these people are arrested, and it goes to the street user eventually. Until we address that root cause, none of this will change. This country doesn't want it to change. The government and the drug trade are big business for both. Don't let these people in the government tell you the truth. It's not the truth. They just want you to think it is. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you let me know what you think of it in the comments below. If you'd like to support our channel further, feel free to contribute. Hit that thanks button below the video. I'll see you next time here on the Sit Down.